Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Israel Tour update. And as we're set to deliberate a list of issues pertaining to the Middle East as well as the broader region, it's always important to highlight and mark that today is 558 days, since the Islamist Hamas and its terror affiliates committed the atrocities of October 7th, with at least 24 hostages still among the living in Hamas captivity, a total of 59 hostages there, with the majority of them, as mentioned, already murdered by this terrorist organization. And there are talks happening behind the scenes via Egyptian mediation at this point in time. Nevertheless, it doesn't seem to have a lot of success on that. Let's now introduce our three panelists for today. I'll start from the top left. We have from Madrid, Spain, joining us, Dr. Rafael Bardahi, who is Spain's former national security advisor, currently CEO of Worldwide Strategy. Next to him, Colonel in Reserve Reuven Ben Shalom, who is a cross-cultural strategist and a senior fellow at the Institute for Counterterrorism at Reichman University. And last but certainly not least, Major General in Reserve Gilshon Cohen, who is formerly the commander of the defense colleges in Israel, an Army Corps commander, and a whole host of other positions that we won't have enough time during the entire edition to discuss. But nonetheless, we will try and utilize the brilliance of our three panelists for today's edition. And to start with, Dr. Bardahi, a new outline was relayed to Hamas. Hamas already is signaling that it's likely not going to accept it. It is trying to pressure America to intervene on its behalf by claiming that now it has lost contact with the dual American-Israeli hostage, Idan, who has been in Hamas captivity for the duration of 558 days already. And it seems like the light at the end of the tunnel continues to dim further and further.
Yes, of course. I think Hamas now, for the first time probably in many months, is experiencing real pressure. They understand, or they should understand, that the American administration under Trump is totally different from the Biden approach to the problem. And also that the world is shifting the attention from Gaza to somewhere else. In the economic realm, with the tariffs policy of Trump, Ukraine or China. So they are not the center of gravity anymore. And also the reassumption of military activities by the Israeli government is putting more pressure on Hamas. So at that point, they have either to surrender or to release all the hostages and apply for some kind of survival. But definitely they are not in the same situation as they were months ago. And I think they start believing that they are in the losing side, finally.
Finally, indeed. General Cohen, from your perspective, the current operations on the ground, are they being successfully executed?
Yes, according to the main goal. Actually, we must believe that the main goal of the government, Netanyahu, and joined by Chief of Staff, is to make a pressure in order to bring Hamas to accept the new mediation and to release around more than hostages. If it will happen, it means that it really happened, that military pressure brought to that outcome. We are already waiting for that, but it yet didn't happen. The main problem is that Hamas are absolutely demanding, and they are rational by demanding that the new ceasefire will come with Israeli commitment to be obliged to bring an end to that war without demanding Hamas to go to exile. Even the Egyptians now are accepting that after that end of the war, Hamas are not really expected to stay with armament and to stay in a position of controlling Gaza Strip. So that's the main issue, not just whether we are coming to get back the hostages, but how we are bringing the end of the war with a kind of surrender from Hamas.
Thank you, General Cohen, Colonel Ben Shalom. Your take from a broader perspective. Obviously, Egypt is also heavily active in this context, more so than the Qataris these days, it seems. What can you tell us about that?
Well, we, of course, view Egypt as a very important partner. This tension between Egypt and Qatar also has sensitivities that even go to the internal issues being debated in Israel now. But I think we welcome Egypt's involvement, always respect their view, but here, even their position, as Gershon just said, is very important, with this fundamental understanding that the day after, we cannot see Hamas still in power. This is a mistake that was made in the past. The world, by the way, as a whole, the international community made this mistake in the past, not going to demilitarization of Gaza and continuing to pour in international assistance. So I think this is very important. Also, Egypt was one of the leaders of this recent initiative by the Arab states around us that Israel pretty much ignored, but perhaps together with Trump's plan and with this plan, we will be able to find some kind of path in the middle that brings all the parties together. As far as the actions on the ground now, we have to listen very closely to what the government is saying, because they are putting the issue of the hostages front stage and not going for full defeating Hamas right now. You can see this in the order of battle. You can see what we're doing now, statements coming out even from the IDF. This is not a full force taking over the Gaza Strip now. It's careful actions of raising up the pressure to bring Hamas to the negotiating table to promote the release of more hostages.
Absolutely. Well, with regard to the relationship between Qatar and Egypt, I think that it's very interesting to note in recent days there have been some developments. Egypt, of course, identifies the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization, designated as such by its higher councils. It banned Al Jazeera, which is a Qatari news channel and propaganda mouthpiece, basically, utilized by the leadership there for its own interests. But it seems like there is some type of rapprochement, at least fiscally so, in which during the course of a meeting between visiting Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, the president of Egypt, to his counterpart in Qatar, Emir al-Thani, they agreed that Qatar would invest over $7 billion in Egypt, which, as we know, in light of the situation in Yemen, particularly with the ongoing blockade of freedom of navigation through the strategic Strait of Bab el-Mandeb, the Egyptian economy is hurting, and it seems that Qatar and the Europeans and others, in broader terms, are trying to salvage the Egyptian economy from collapse. Dr. Bardahi, to what degree are we going to see a certain shift in the next several weeks or months when it comes to the Yemeni file? The U.S. military central command is continuing its offensive operations against the Iranian proxy Ansar Allah, dominated by the Houthi tribe in Yemen. Is this being successful?
Well, I think the new approach by the Trump administration not to allow the Houthis to do whatever they want and to stop the sea lines of communication and attack Israel as well is over. They have proved that what they say, they have taken action afterwards. So the continuous operations against the Houthis is conducted somehow successfully up to now. And I think that also putting some pressure on the surrounding countries as well. No? But I think what is important here is the change of attitude and policy from the United States. I think that is the real mover and shaking all the region. And we will see that from Yemen to Egypt as well, no? Where they are dependent on the military and economic aid of the United States. So I think that's the lever and the leverage that we have now to obtain a better picture on the whole region, no? From the Levant to the Gulf.
Absolutely. Well, General Cohen, when we're talking about that area of the Horn of Africa, naturally, there were reports in recent weeks of efforts by the Houthis to construct some sort of arrangement in recent months with the Islamic State in Somalia to try and basically clamp down on the waterways there, the shipping lanes from both sides. And the Americans have been quite proactive in striking at the Islamic State due to this fact. But nonetheless, it seems that the coalition now, apparently, they're also circulating reports about potential ground operations that would be led by yet another Saudi led coalition. Uh, is that something viable in your perspective?
Yes, it must bring the outcome, but it is yet not at all well predicted when it will happen, because the Houthi are very well decisive about their mission, and it is far away beyond just local interests. In the very fact that they are succeeding to deny the capability of a superpower like the United States to compel upon them a ceasefire and to stop the blockade, that is a proof of their being in a position not of a superpower, but a very, very important factor in the region. It means that they are yet not really considered to be a regional superpower in the region, but by their capability to deny the capabilities of a superpower like United States, they are in the game of superpowers. So the very fact that they are leading themselves also to the west side of the Red Sea, even to Sudan, to Djibouti, it means that they are a real threat, geographical, strategical threat, and they are still going ahead with weaponization. So it is yet far away from really bringing a promise that the blockade is coming to an end.
Absolutely. Well, we will put also into context that the Iranians are the ones ultimately supplying the Houthis with the various components in order to assemble the various munitions on Yemeni soil, and they do so very smartly. They don't have concrete installations in one location. They have multiple assembly lines across a very large terrain, and therefore victories are not attained only by air forces. There need to be boots on the ground to ensure the eradication of those type of assembly lines. And on that, Colonel Ben Shalom, to what degree is the United States capable, alongside other navies that are operating alongside it, able to frustrate Iranian smuggling operations that are ongoing as we speak?
Well, thank you for that question, because I was first going to say that from an Israeli perspective, Yemen is far away, and it's not for us to tackle alone. Also, because it's not our problem. It's a world problem, mainly affecting economy, but all the countries around us. The second thing is that we have to be very careful with, issuing these threats, and we'll eliminate them, we'll target them. I'm talking even the United States. Look back in history, when the United States is determined to go in somewhere and do regime change or bring about some kind of strategic change, it's not that easy, and it can take long. The very geography of Yemen, the kinds of means that they're employing, makes it very difficult. So much so that we could have a campaign of months by the United States, very determined, and still, after all that, you'll have a missile shot towards Israel. But I do see from the rhetoric coming out of the US, the military efforts recently, and what you were just discussing now, perhaps gearing towards a broader effort on the ground, I think this is probably the strongest we've seen so far. And look, we have no choice. This kind of threat, this choking point, and the strategic ramifications for the world, this is a classic example where everyone has to get together and say, okay, this is not going to happen. We're going to stop it. We're going to contain it. We're going to limit it. And I think the Houthis are going to see more and more operations to stop it. Again, it won't be 100%, not to the last missile, but maybe a strategic shift in what we've seen so far. But one thing I learned from Gershon is respect this rival. It is a bitter, serious rival.
Absolutely. Dr. Barrahi, brief point on the Yemeni file. The Houthis have threatened Saudi Arabia in light of the fact that President Donald Trump is expected to travel there next month, that it will not hesitate to launch an attack on Saudi Arabia with all that the tools at its disposal the moment the American leader arrives. Does this create a new calculus? And secondly, we will immediately divert also to the Iranian file, where on the one hand, the foreign minister of Iran, Abbas Araghchi, said as followed: "What is certain is that Iran's enrichment is a real, accepted, and factual matter, and we are prepared to build confidence regarding potential concerns, but the principle of enrichment is non-negotiable." While then Ambassador Witkoff, the chief negotiator and envoy of President Trump in the Middle East, posted on X the following: "A deal with Iran will only be completed if it is a Trump deal. Any final arrangement must set a framework for peace, stability, and prosperity in the Middle East, meaning that Iran must stop and eliminate its nuclear enrichment and weaponization program." This seems more complicated.
Well, yes, let me say first on the Yemeni side that the best solution to the Houthi challenge is confront directly Tehran, because the Houthis are just a surrogate of Iranian leadership. So that's the best way to make them less powerful and more marginal in the near future. But anyway, yes, talks started indirectly in Oman last Saturday. They are coming again for a second round of negotiation or talks, better say, this coming Saturday in Rome. I think the narrative and the tune from the White House has changed from last Saturday, which were more accommodative. Now it's more demanding. It's back to the limits in time for the negotiation. I think if the Americans really understood that the Iranians would like to buy time more than anything else, and the Iranians, when they enter any negotiation in the past, was to preserve their power and to preserve the nuclear advancement in the nuclear program. If they understand that, I think there is no way for having a bad deal. No, but again, let's see what happens. No, let's see how flexible are the Iranians, how firm is the American administration, and at the end of the day, if there is a clash of trains, I don't think there is any other option that to resort to the military action against the nuclear program in Iran, and probably some of the political leadership as well.
Absolutely. Well, be it a deal or a kinetic attack, I believe that the outcome should be the same. And that is the calculus that needs to be made here. General Cohen, your position on that?
Yes, the main anxiety of Israel is that the outcome will come back to President Obama agreement, and this in itself is not enough. Everyone heard Prime Minister Netanyahu speaking about a deal that will bring the nuclear potential of Iran to be in the same position like Libya. And there is great difference between Libya and Iran. Iran is a state with 90 million people, with scientific professional people, and they can do everything regarding a nuclear program. It is not at all beginning to be similar to Libya. So if they are stopping with that endeavor, it could be just for a while. And this is the main Israeli anxiety. And here we will have to see what really will bring the negotiation process. And it will take time. It couldn't be an immediate outcome that everyone will come to be well happy with it.
Indeed. With that being said, of course, the Libya deal that was in 2003, if I'm not mistaken, brought about a decisive end to Libya's model. It eradicated, basically, they destroyed all of the nuclear installations, and that was the decision by Muammar Gaddafi at the time to try and have his regime survive. Now the Iranians are saying, look at what happened to Gaddafi. His regime did not survive. So they are between a rock and a hard place. The question is, will it be then inevitable? Since if they do not come to terms with the fact that they need to concede, this might bring their own regime into question whether or not it will survive a kinetic strike that will not stop just with their nuclear infrastructure. Colonel Ben Shalom?
I don't want to hurt U.S. strategic messaging, but I don't think a kinetic strike will bring about the end of the Iranian regime. And also, unfortunately, yes, looking at the Libyan example and also the Ukrainian example, perhaps Iran can say those that give up their nuclear ambitions for promises, look where it leads. But here, again, you have to look at the rhetoric that's coming from Israel and the U.S. We're not going to allow them to have a nuclear weapon, period. This isn't strategic messaging. This is a fact. Everyone that knows us understands that they're not going to have a nuclear weapon. Now, the framework of this deal, the scope of it, that's questionable. I don't think it's going to go to the broad perspective that Israel wants. But hopefully it leads to a mechanism where they don't have a nuclear weapon in the foreseeable future. And I know that sounds a bit like the previous JCPOA, but I personally believe that that's where it's going to go. Rhetoric now means nothing. Witkoff says this, tomorrow Trump says that. It's just rhetoric in a negotiation, setting red lines and then new red lines. The question, what's going to be at the end? The only thing I know for sure is they're not going to have a weapon. The question is how. Well, I hope it's going to be with diplomacy. Unfortunately, I think it's going to be a relatively narrow scope, and I don't think it's going to go to the broader dimensions that Israel would want. That's just my assessment.
A kinetic strike alone will not bring about the fall of the regime, but I think that causality is a factor. So we need to see the big picture also from a domestic perspective and other aspects that may, be like a snowball rolling.
I would argue that for the Iranian regime, perhaps capitulating to the U.S. or being perceived as a regime that capitulates to the U.S., that would be dangerous for the regime. Unfortunately, this may be their calculation that it's worth sustaining a kinetic blow.
Right. Well, the Iranians are having a success right now in Somalia, where Al-Shabaab this morning, with the assistance of the Iranians via advisors and other aspects of the RGC Quds Force, have mounted a very decisive attack against the Somali army and the Syrian National Army, Jaish al-Watani, that helped also Hayat Tahrir al-Sham take over Damascus, ultimately was there. This time they fled from their various positions, and it seems like Al-Shabaab is not very far from taking over Mogadishu. So we'll see what's happening there, as this is still a developing story. There are also other developments with regard to Syria, but we don't have enough time for that. 1 minute each, whatever you want to focus on. Dr. Barrahi, we'll start with you.
Well, I would say that despite what they are trying to attempt everywhere in the world, Iran is much weaker now than a year ago. They have lost almost every tool they had by proxies in the Levant. They know that the Israelis are able to bomb without any compromise of their forces in Iranian soil. They understand that the new administration is totally different. And so either they capitulate or they strengthen themselves and try to absorb a kinetic or whatever attack may happen in the future. But it is clear that the options are a good deal, a bad deal, or no deal at all, and a military strike. And today we don't know what is going to happen, but I hope that it's for the better interest and the best interest of Israel and the Western world, any outcome of the talks.
Absolutely. General Cohen?
Quite sure that President Trump really prefer a deal upon strike. And if really we will have a new deal, it could really open a new arrangement in the whole Mediterranean region, including the intervention of Russia, China, and we will have to see.
Colonel Ben Shalom?
Unfortunately, we're a peace-seeking nation, and we always use the term peace, and we seek peace. But unfortunately, talking when the U.S. speak now about peaceful resolution, not very relevant for Iran. So remember that everything that we're doing, including, by the way, with Gaza, it's looking for security, stability, mechanisms to mitigate the threat, push it away, unfortunately not going to this ultimate dream of all of us. And that's for a peaceful, stable, prosperous Middle East. That should be the goal of all of us, and every leader that can promote that should be done.
Absolutely. Well, there's 1 more minute left, and I'd like to give that to Dr. Barrahi. The Iranians continue to focus also on the ballistic missile program, their satellite program, and that is a factor that also was relayed by the Americans that they would not agree to that, since naturally that is aimed at producing an intercontinental ballistic missile that may threaten the homeland. Do you see that factor being resolved, or is the American stance truly resolute on this?
Well, we don't know yet what the outcome of the talks will be, but I think the American administration is very clear about the three legs of any comprehensive agreement. Is the nuclear portfolio, is the ballistic missiles and other delivery systems, and also the malign activities of Iran in the region. And I think they are all intertwined. And I don't think the American will be happy to leave the Iranians with two of them without being limited. So I'm optimistic in that approach. But again, we have to wait and see what the outcome of the talks are.
Dr. Rafael Barrahi, General Cohen, Colonel Ben Shalom, thank you very much for all your valuable insights. I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition, from here in Jerusalem, wishing you shalom. The Middle East, home to the cradle of civilization, retains a reputation from time immemorial as one of the most complex, conflict-ridden regions of the world. A cluster of nations, religions, powers, and influences, Mideast intricacies pose conundrums to even the most astute individuals. Bombarded daily, indeed every minute, by a barrage of information, some accurate, yet most of it less so, TV7 Israel invites you to watch and hear some of the most knowledgeable experts, most of whom partook in creating policies shaping this region today. Join us for Jerusalem Studio every Tuesdays and Fridays for content that truly matters. For more of TV7's productions and editorials, we invite you to visit our website at TV7israelnews.com.